Today, we're going to look at some interesting passages from a book entitled The Renaissance of the Greek Ideal. This book was written by Diana Watts, one of the earliest female instructors of jiu-jitsu in England. She was an athletic person and she had a great interest in improving the condition of the body. Her interest drew her to the training she believed that the ancient Greeks used to develop their impressive physiques. While I don't agree with her on every point, she makes a number of useful observations. Her passion for the subject makes this old book quite palatable, and so I would recommend it to those who are highly interested in the field. For the rest of you, I'll be pulling out the most important passages in my opinion, and we'll look at how they can give us a new perspective on some ideas we've looked at a lot on this channel. Like Delsarte before her, Watts studied ancient Greek statues, and in the book she even goes about replicating their poses. Here is her basic conclusion on the condition of the ancient Greek in comparison to the modern man she was surrounded by in the late 1800s and early 1900s. The modern human being has drifted so far away in physical form from the Greek as to fail to realize the differences. These differences, however, are not organic, but are in all probability the result of early training. This interestingly aligns with F.M. Alexander's perspective that postural problems were in a sense from a deficiency in how children were being taught to use themselves. Watts believed she had, in her studies, come to figure out how to revive the impressive physical condition of ancient Greeks. This secret consists in a condition of the muscles totally different from any realized by athletes since the time of the Greeks, a condition of tension, which transforms dead weight into a living force, and which made the Greek as different from the modern human being as a stretched rubber band differs from a slack one. We are, of course, well aware that due tension is what makes efficient movement possible, but let's hear her out a little further. The meaning of this word tension has become so distorted that, being confused with rigidity, the stiffness and staying of unnecessary force, it is generally considered to be avoided. The true definition of tension is elasticity. She then quotes another old book for her definition of tension. Tension is the stress when two bodies are connected by a string, and the force exerted on either is directed towards the other. This isn't the clearest definition, so she clarifies that tension is the stretch. If we connect two objects with a string, or better yet, a rubber band, when we pull one away, we create a force on the other object that is in the direction of the object that is pulling away. This will produce tension in the band will stretch. And while Watts speaks mainly about muscles, she references the tension of tendons in a footnote, and I think there can be little doubt if she had modern knowledge about fascia that she would agree that tension in the fascia is also essential to the condition she wishes to bring about. This condition of stretch was the preliminary essential for the muscles in all exercises of training performed by the Greeks. Up to the present time, no study whatever has been made of this essential condition, nor has any emphasis been laid upon the fact that no precision of movement can be acquired without it. Yet it is only when there is complete connection, through stretch, of all the muscles with the center of gravity that any movement can be said to be executed without strain. Relaxation of this stretch means disconnection of one set of muscles with another, involving independent movements, independent reactions, and proportionate loss of combined force, while the maintenance of this connection, through stretch, means a condition in which every muscle has been called upon to share in the work required, having been linked with the others, which in their turn come directly in touch with the weight to be moved or held still as the case may be. She rather nimbly sums up a slightly complex idea, which is that when we relax one set of muscles, that relaxation actually causes fatigue. She continues, "If the connection of the muscles be not complete, if any part of the body is slack, it means just so much dead weight to be carried, and just by so much drag upon the movement will the rhythm be dislocated. Efficient movement requires unity, and as she says, a condition of complete tension. This linking together of every muscle produces the maximum of power with the minimum of effort, resulting in movement all in one piece, as it were. This is something I think F.M. Alexander would certainly agree with. Watts reckons that training of the feet was an essential part of early training for children. Above all, the child was made to walk on the inside of its foot, with the toes planted in straight line with the heel, never turned outwards. However, her ideas do not line up exactly with the Masoero model of the foot. She produced this image that shows how the shape of her foot changed by using a different shoe with a sole of a different shape. The differences do go in the direction that we've looked at for the optimal position of the feet, but don't go quite as far as Masoero would recommend. The other difference is that Watts advocates for having the weight of the body on the ball of the foot, not the heel. This is an idea perhaps worth experimenting with, though her demonstration of going up on the toes makes me less inclined to follow the idea. To me, this is clearly leaning forward and shortening the back, inevitable results of spilling out onto the front of the feet. Watts also makes an etymological connection between the diaphragm and the mind, which are quite similar words in ancient Greek. She believed the ancient Greek saw the diaphragm muscle, which is an instrumental muscle in breathing and is also just below the heart, as intimately connected with the will and the spirit of a person. By lifting up your heart with the diaphragm becomes a generator of due tension that strengthens one's spirit, she says. While it's a beautiful idea, in my research I found linguists who cast quite a bit of doubt on her interpretation of the Greek passages she uses to support her argument. However, I do think there's some truth in the conclusion, even if the linguistics don't back up the connection. We'll look at one more longer passage, one that I think is quite fascinating, because it describes a problem we've looked at many times on this channel, but we hear it from a different perspective. The modern human being has lost sight of the fact that the skeleton was not made to support alone the whole weight of the body, but to facilitate exactitude of movement by its system of leverage. The muscles are the principal weight carriers, and able, when in a perfect condition of tension, so to disperse the weight along their constantly moving cords of elasticity, that no aggregate of weight is ever felt at any one point, and therefore no dead weight of fatigue is possible. It is at the waist that the lack of tension in the modern human being is most apparent, there being nothing but the spine as bone support for all that part of the body, which extends from the lower ribs to the hips. But in reality, there is the muscle of the diaphragm going through the center, and those of the abdomen in the front, while at the back are those forming a thick band on each side of the spine, and spreading up and around the sides as the latissimus dorsi. These central muscles of the diaphragm, abdomen, and back are practically powerless in the average modern human being. In the case of women, on account of strongly boned corsets, which preclude all free movement of this part of the body. And in the case of men, from a general slackness, perhaps a reaction from an earlier period of exaggerated stiffness. The result of chronic slackness in these muscles is the crumpling up of the waist and the settling down of the body into the hips, very much like an egg in an egg cup. The constant pressure and dead weight of all the upper part of the body on the hips puts the whole strain on the hip muscles, which become exaggeratedly developed, while those of the abdomen and the corace muscles on each side of it are practically non-existent. While the emphasis on the diaphragm is something to consider, I'm more partial to her concept of complete tension. All the muscles and fascia of the body interact and depend on each other, which she also states in this passage. If we want to efficiently use our musculature, we need due tension everywhere, including the connective tissues like fascia. In initial Alexander technique lessons, we really do go around and try to find all the areas in our body that we are neglecting, relaxing, and which are missing due tension. By incorporating the movements of all these parts of the body, we can gain due tension everywhere, including the diaphragm. Overall, I think The Renaissance of the Greek Ideal is a book of some interest, even though I disagree with several broad and specific claims in it. Watts gives us a few things to consider on top of corroborating much of our diagnosis of the modern human body.